University of Northern Colorado, and I was told to make my point at the beginning of the presentation, so here is my point. I am looking for collaborators. I'll make that point again at the end. So, I study a non-timber forest product called Mauritia flexuosa, or aguaje in Peru. It forms very dense stands and is actually pretty common throughout the Amazon rainforest. This plant is very important for a lot of different animal species, but is also really important for a lot of people that harvest the plant. I forgot that it was going to go on its own, so my slides aren't in timing order. Sorry. I'm interested in this plant because even though it is very common, the harvest of this plant in the Peruvian Amazon is very intense. So what you see here are very thick stands of the fruit.
I think you're going to have to use, you're going to have to do it manually.
It's not
doing it for you. It won't get quit.
I'm sorry. None of these buttons are working. Does this one work? Is it going? All right, we're gonna fake it. You can see it like this. All right, so this is the tree. It's called Mauritia flexuosa, and it's very important for a lot of different people who rely on it, not only for food, but also for livelihoods, because they sell it in markets throughout the northern Peruvian Amazon. This is also really important for a lot of different animal species, like the red wakari, which is pictured here, that is an endangered species. So although Mauritia flexuosa is not endangered, it does support other endangered species. It's also important for species like the tapir, which are also important as a food source and a cultural icon for indigenous communities. The market for aguaje is huge in Iquitos, in the largest city of the Peruvian Amazon. These sacks each weigh about 30 to 45 kilograms, and every day, hundreds to thousands of these sacks come into the city from all throughout the rainforest. Most of these sacks are filled with fruit that come from cut down trees, which is not very sustainable because this particular palm is very long-lived and slow maturing. It doesn't start producing fruit until it's about 10 or 15 years old, but once it does start producing, it can be very productive for decades. So, I want to share with you all two observations, a consideration, apply a transition, and then make my call for help again. This is the area, and if you look here, this is the city of Iquitos, and these are all of the communities that we know of that produce or harvest fruit and bring it to the city. Of those, 90% of the fruit come from only 24 different communities, and if you look at these yellow dots, they tend to be very far from the city, which is kind of strange for all of that harvest. But luckily, while I was doing my dissertation, somebody else was doing their dissertation, and what they found, my animations aren't going to show up in this situation, is that if you look at the large arrow, most of the fruit was getting loaded up onto these transport boats, and then those boats would fill up once you reach this red line, and then there would be no room for anybody else to add their fruit to the boat past that line. And so there was an interesting transportation situation happening. If you apply these same arrows to the system that I showed, you'll see that most of these yellow dots, or where most of the fruit is coming from, occur before the line. And so it seems like this ability to access the market of Iquitos just from space on the boats has a huge influence on where fruit is getting harvested. The other thing that we saw is that there is a huge amount of fluctuation in price for the fruit. Not only is there a huge fluctuation of price due to how many sacks appear each day in the market, but there is a huge reaction to that price. When the price is high, people want to harvest more sacks and bring it into the market. When the price is low, people stop harvesting, and so it tends to be very reactive. This was showing price data from our research in 2011 and 2012, and also price research from a different study in 1985. And so this has been occurring for a long time, normalized to $2012. I had some nice animations, I'm sorry. So when you put together this transportation inconsistency and the reactions to the price fluctuations, what we see is that there's a lot of waste. People are harvesting fruit, not able to get it on the boat and it rots, or people are bringing fruit to a market that's already saturated and then are unable to sell it. I argue in my dissertation that a lot of this has to do with poor communication network. So in that area, there were not cell phone towers, and there's very few radios. It's not very well connected. However, while I was collecting data for my dissertation, 2 different cell phone companies were constructing cell phone towers. And so I have this really wonderful, rich data set full of information about communities along the river who were functioning in a network with poor communication, and I believe that that is about to change. So some of these cell phone towers actually started going online this past year. What we can look at from existing literature is the reaction to these types of harvesting communities to increase communication. This is a study from India looking at fishermen, and what was shown is that once they obtain cell phones, they start to talk about price information to each other, and that information dissemination is pretty instantaneous, and that results in less waste. What I want to look at in this system is whether or not it also results in fewer cut down trees. So that is my call for collaborators if you work in network analysis or governance or communication, because my background is ecology, and I'm very happy to chat with you more about that after the session.